Okay, this is Moshe coming to you from Israel in the Galilee. Today is the 8th of January. Wow, so we got 12 days to Trump, less than 2 weeks. It's 9:34 in the morning. Our weather is rather okay today, no complaints. 56 now, high of 67, sunny. Tomorrow the same, but partly cloudy, and then it stays like that. And then towards the end of next week, maybe rain, but not sure. They can't predict that far out. A lot of times they do, and it fails. Okay, I'm gonna go jump into the live stream, make sure we got a live stream, and put a couple quick posts up while people are coming in. And I'm not going to be able to talk when I put the posts up. We got sound and picture, and I'm going to put some posts up real quick while people come in. I'm not going to be long. And I'll get my email address up. Okay, I'm done with that. Before I forget, I'd like to remind you to keep praying for Trixie the dog. She's getting a little better, and I don't know what's going on, but please keep praying for Trixie the dog, okay? Thank you. All right, I'm going to do some praise. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 All right, what we're going to do today is we're going to do a deep dive in what can or what do we think Trump is going to do in the Middle East. Now, having said that, Trump could begin to do some things in the Middle East, and then there's reactions that are unexpected, and he has to modify his plans and so forth. So I would say even Trump is not entirely sure what he's going to do in the Middle East. How could he be? But I'll give you the likely scenarios of what Trump can and will do. Okay. Um, we were currently under military alert, high alert in Israel, something to do with Iran making some threats, and there was some statement on a TV station, and then it got rescinded. And I don't know what the real threat level is, but we have a home front command that talks to the civilians and tells us what to do, and we're not getting any alerts from them. The military's on alert. They don't know if Iran's going to do something, what it is, and or they may know. I don't know, But when it gets serious, they start giving us directives, and that has not happened. So yes, the military is on alert, but they have not put the country on alert. If they felt the missile attack from Iran was imminent, we'd be hearing about it, and the Biden administration would be coming up with one of the many warnings that never came to pass, stating that there's an imminent attack from Iran. Iran is saying they got some new air defense systems and they got radar for it that can go 500 kilometers, which is about 300 miles. Now, this type of radar is not the same kind of radar you use to guide missiles, and we're way too far away for that to work. So it's an anti-aircraft system. Do I think it would work against our jets? No. Do I think they really have it? I don't know. They lie so much, you have no idea with them. Okay? You have no idea. Russia has, they say, lost 800,000 soldiers in the 3 years of the Ukraine fighting. And then people turn around and say Russia's winning. How could you come up with a theory like that? I don't see Russia winning and I don't see Ukraine winning. All I see is they're knocking each other's lights out. There was a fire about 500 kilometers inside Russia at an oil refinery near an air base yesterday. And that would be probably a bit too far for Ukraine to have done with a missile. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they have a missile that can stretch that far. They certainly have drones, I believe, that can go that far without a doubt. And they may have used an F-16. I don't know. We don't have the details about how it started, if it was just not a high believer in coincidence. I don't think their oil refinery just all of a sudden happened to have a fire when Ukraine has hit a number of Russian oil refineries inside Russia in recent months. So I would say Ukraine did it. Could have been underground sabotage, for instance. You know, they could have had people get in there, get close, and fire 2 or 3 shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles or some other kind of shoulder-fired missile into the refinery. We don't know what happened. And Putin is unlikely to tell us the truth. His analysis of the fire is likely going to be propaganda to, not show the weakness of Russia. Man. The fire in California, is this the beginning of Jeremiah 50:51, where the Lord says, I will kindle fires in and around her cities? In and about her cities is the King James. We don't know. We've seen a lot of fires in California in the past. Not a big believer in coincidence. It could be the beginning of that. I have no idea. I really don't. Don't jump the gun on that one, because we've seen a lot of fires in the West Coast and it didn't come to any prophetic big fulfillment. The area is Pacific Palisades, Malibu, and LA. Malibu is home of the big S-Spot Elite, and there's 30,000 people that had to evacuate. There was damage to 13,000 houses. Now, it doesn't mean they burned down, it means they got damaged. They mobilized a lot of airplanes to drop water and chemicals on the fire, and they mobilized firemen, and they're asking for retired firefighters to come back and help. And so they're very scared about this. It's driven by high winds up to 100 miles an hour gusts, and they call it a fire NATO, and it is scary. I don't know yet what's going to happen with this fire. Will it spread? Malibu is a pocket of satanic garbage. Pacific Palisades, I don't know much about, and LA, I don't know much about. I mean, in terms of, I know some things about LA. I've been there a number of times, but I don't know what part of LA is affected and so forth. They're saying it's some very expensive real estate's affected. My assumption is Malibu. on that, because that I'm familiar with. The elite live on the beach by Malibu. Their houses are set back maybe 30 to 100 yards, depending from the water's edge. And they frequently have the house on stilts and they go up steps to get in the house. And they're beautiful houses, but they're not large mansions. I would say they get in the area of maybe 2 to 3,500 square feet. They don't get the big sprawling Beverly Hills houses that are, 5 to 25,000 square feet. They don't get up that big over there. So you don't move into Malibu because you want a great big house. You move there because you want to live a sedate, quiet life on the ocean. And it's loaded with stars and people like that. I expect many of these people have other homes. So James Wood, who's a kind of had his day as an actor, not a great, big star like Stallone or somebody like that, but he had his day and he got active on social media and he got shut down on one of the big platforms. He's politically active in the right wing area. And he was doing a telephone live stream or video of what it was, and I watched it. It was pretty scary. He was in the process of evacuating. So they evacuate people preemptively because they don't want to do rescues. Rescues are life-threatening to firefighters. And if they don't do the rescues, they just sit there and watch the people burn in their house. Well, then somebody says we need another leader of the fire department and stuff like that. Being a firefighter is a rather dangerous job, you know. There's a lot of them that get injured and hurt and killed. And they get smoke inhalation, they get all kinds of, it's a dangerous job, you know. It's the first responder job. And being a cop is also a dangerous job, but it's a different danger. As a cop, having been one in my young age, if you use your head and you're always thinking and watching and you're alert, you can save yourself a lot of times. But when you're talking about a firefighter, it's not the case. If there's 4 or 5 drug dealers from another country holed up in a house, your captain isn't going to tell a bunch of cops to storm the house, okay? Because there's going to be a lot of injuries on both sides, and they're not going to do that. They're going to surround the house and call for backup and more backup, and they're going to call for SWAT and armored vehicles and gas and cut the power to the house, stuff like that. But with a fire, there's a sense of urgency. If you have a bunch of really bad cartel drug dealers from another country holed up in a house, they're holed up in a house. You got time on your side. They don't. You do as a cop, so you wait it out. With a fire, you can't do that. Every second the fire burns, the destruction increases. I met a guy once on a cruise. He used to be a policeman in New York, and then he transferred to the fire department. Now, that sounds crazy to a lot of people in it. It's not a normal occurrence, but in New York, it happens. They switch back and forth. They do. It's not rare. I don't understand why they do, because the jobs are, they're first responders, but they're radically different. And when things go good for the fire guys, they're in the firehouse, right? They got internet, TV, a kitchen, beds, showers, weight room, gym, They basically are just on a shift, and it could be a 24-hour shift, and or they have all different kinds of shifts, but usually they'll go in about 2 days a week. If they're there for 24-hour cycle, they're there, maybe they do that twice a week, and then they got a lot of days off. So it enables these guys to get another job. Let's say they got a relative or a friend in the construction business. He could give them work, or they do flea market, or they do, eBay auctions, or whatever they're going to do, work with, whatever they want to do, because when they're off, they're off. It's rare that they ever get a phone call, hey, you got to report in, like a cop on his time off might get called in if there's a riot or something, but it's pretty rare with firemen. If a great big fire breaks out, it'll happen, but it's rare. So they're hanging around the firehouse, sleeping, reading, talking. I knew a guy that in California was a fireman, and he went to law school while he was a fireman because you're sitting around the firehouse. He would just study. He managed to turn off all the noise and the chatter, and he'd study. And he got himself through law school. He went to one of these, not a 3-year accredited law school, one of these 4-year law schools that is easy to get into, and most of them flunk out. And then you got to pass the bar, and then you become a lawyer. He became a lawyer. So, you got a lot of options you don't have as a police officer, as a fireman. So he told me when he left, he was 8 years as a cop. This is, you know, unusual to some extent. Switched to the fire, and he said he actually worked his way up as a fireman to a lieutenant. They don't have sergeants. They got firefighters. Then they got in New York anyway. Then they got a lieutenant. Then they got a captain, and then you get into commanders and different levels and positions they got. But the firehouse is run by a captain or captains because they keep a captain there on every shift. So captain is usually a rather experienced firefighter that controls the efforts of the firefighters at the fire. So they he was at a fire, and he wound up hanging off of a roof because the fire was pushing him off the roof. So he's hanging on the edge of the roof, and they were trying to get a rescue going for him, and they didn't make it in time, and he lost his grip eventually, and he fell. It was about 3 stories, and I met him, and he told me, we talked. I told him I swear to law enforcement, and he told me that they didn't give a hoot about him when he fell. Yeah, the other guys came and got him and took him to the hospital. And he said he was all busted up. He has to take pain pills all the time and everything. But they gave him a full pension, which was probably, as a lieutenant, it was probably pretty good money. He said they just didn't care. He said they just processed him like paperwork. That was it. No compassion, nothing. You know? And he was left to go through life with a comfortable income for sure, but all busted up. So anyway, firefighters it's a hard job, and it's a very dangerous job. But a lot of guys get attracted to it because they got the time off, they do other things. So anyway, they work for their money, let me tell you. These guys, you know, going into a burning building, I mean, that's scary stuff. I've gone into warehouses and houses at night where you're pretty sure there's criminals and they're hiding from you, and I could deal with that. That doesn't bother me too much, you know. I've done it, and a lot of people would get scared. I never really would get scared. Um, I'd get on alert, and I'd get on edge. I'd be really paying attention to everything. You want to use your nose for smell. You might smell the jerks. You don't know. You could smell them. You want to listen to see if you could hear them. If you're in a structure like a warehouse or a house, and usually they're very dark, by the way, and you have your gun out, you have a light, some kind of flashlight, and you're really careful, and if they're hiding from you, there's a high probability if you find them, they'll just throw the towel in and surrender to you. But there's also another high probability they'll try to crack you over the head with something, or shoot you, or stab you. Stab you isn't highly likely. Hit you with something, throw something at you, or um, shoot you if they got a gun. It's dangerous stuff. You know, but I don't rate that with walking into a burning building. Nobody knows if the roof's going to fall down, if the girders are going to collapse on you, if a wall's going to fall down. If you open up a door, you don't know what the heck's going to happen. They might touch the door to see how hot it is. It's really dangerous. And you got to keep going, you know. And some people, when buildings are on fire, they hide in the closet. Usually they'll die from smoke. They'll usually pass out and then get burned up, or they go out a window and they might try standing by the window, and then the fire gets worse. They'll sit with the feet out the window and try to hang out the window, and they fall and they jump and they die. It's really so time's of the essence. So anyway, kudos to the fire people. They really work for their money in it. When you're in a big fire, a wildfire like this in California, you know it's pretty bad, but nobody's going to tell a firefighter to run into a wildfire, and it's only a house they would try to go into, and you don't know if there's anybody in the house. How the heck do you know if anybody's in there? Some neighbors might tell you or something, but you don't know. Let me look at the live stream and see if I got any issues here. um okay. So we don't know much about what's going on with this fire, and are more fires going to break out around America? I haven't seen it. Could happen. I don't know. Or is this just something that we've seen many times? Malibu has had fires before. I think the really richer people live in Beverly Hills. That's where I think but the ones that live in Malibu are pretty rich, and a lot of them are from the entertainment business. Okay, Canada being a 51st state. Yesterday I talked about this, and I said there's people in Canada that want to do this and things like this. Okay, here's the problem. You can't just say, boom, you're a 51st state. Trump could send the armies into Canada and conquer them, but I would say the chances of that are just about non existent. Okay, so the people in Canada would have to probably have a voter referendum where they go to the ballots in a special election and vote whether or not they should become a 51st state. Now, how many months would it take to set that up? Well, a long time, probably 6 months. Do we have that perfect time? And then let's say they set it up even in 3 months and actually have a vote in 3 months. That's near impossible. But let's say they did. Syria fell in 11 days. Well, then the United States has to create conditions about becoming a 51st state, right? And Canada has to agree to these conditions. So they probably would want to have these conditions stated when they have the referendum, the vote. So the Americans would have to have conferences with them and come up with a proposal that the Congress would ratify. So you could imagine them going back and forth on this. See? And you got to prepare for this. Canada has their own dollar. Now they'd have to use the US dollar. You'd have to they'd have to work with the Federal Reserve Bank. What about their banks? The transition. What about people that are in Canada that are, there on work visas, extended visas, permanent residents, and do they become citizens? What happens to them? There's so much. The reality of this is, let's say they passed it in 6 months, which I greatly doubt would happen, but Syria fell in 11 days. So let's say they did it in 6 months. That means Canada and America negotiated, agreed for terms of this. The Canadian people went and voted and passed it, and the American Congress passed it, and the president signed it. Would it go into effect the next day? That would be chaos. It would be a year down the road. They would give them a year to get ready for this. They have to. The military would do what? Transition to becoming American military? How does that work? The police would probably stay police in the local area. I mean, it's just massive, okay? Healthcare issues, immigration issues, tax issues. It's just massive. So, I mean, maybe a year and a half till it went into effect. So, it would probably be at least 2 years if it happened. And prophetically, there ain't that much time. So, I don't think we're going to see Canada as the next state. Could I be wrong? Yeah. Could it happen in a real accelerated fashion? Yeah. But you're still going to have to take a year lead time on something like this. You can't do it quickly. It's too much. It's way too much. And then the Canadians are going to have to be operating like with American gun control laws. But as a state, they could batten down the hatches on gun control if they wanted to. But I, I don't see it. Greenland. Trump Jr. went to Greenland. The Greenland people want to apparently go to America. Apparently, Greenland has a lot of oil, but it's not easy to get to. It's not easy to get to. There's not a lot of people living in Greenland. Let's get a population figure. It's not high. No, I don't know. The internet clicked off for a second. Greenland has a, no, I don't know, the internet clicked off for a second. Greenland has a lot of minerals that would be used in manufacturing telecommunication products that we're buying from China. And that's apparently Trump wants to make that stop. The oil they got is a lot of oil, billions of barrels, but it's hard to get to. So if they could devise a way to get that oil out of there, they could get it out of there. And then that would be a real boost of an economy, assuming prophetically time goes on. If he buys Greenland, does Greenland become a 51st state? I guess so. Now that would be quicker than Canada, I think, but I think Denmark would have to hold a referendum vote, and Denmark is consistently saying we're not selling Greenland. But you can make investments in Greenland. They offered Trump making investments in Greenland, which is a fallback because that gets them to buy the telecommunications manufacturing minerals that are needed without using China. So it could happen that way. I could see that happening rather quickly. That wouldn't be a problem. That could happen in a week or two, it's nothing. That's probably the direction to go. Mexico becoming a state, I think that's right out of Dell Comics. It's just a joke. It's never going to happen. Prophecy shows us it's not going to happen. The walls of America get knocked down, burned, and all that. So they're going to plow through the wall and come into America when the sleeper agents hit and try to ransack America and get their looting and pillaging. So I don't see Mexico at all. North Korea put 250 mobilized missile launchers. So that's a thing that looks more or less like a half track or a truck or even maybe almost like a tank that has missile launchers. They come in various flavors. He put 250 into the DMZ, which is a violation of the ceasefire they have with South Korea. And that's a bad threat to South Korea. These are medium range missiles, so he could reach, I don't know how far, but I would say, let's think. If he really has these as medium range missiles, I would say he's probably in the 150 to 300-mile range. That means he could strike that big American base in South Korea, which used to have, before tensions got high, 28,000 soldiers. So I would say now they're probably at 35 or 40,000, something like that. But that's a significant base, and he would have access to that easily with medium range missiles. So I think that the base is probably in the 60, 75-mile range from the border with North Korea, which was sufficient years ago when they built it to keep it out of artillery range, because North Korea used to have, well, they still do, tons of artillery pieces, and they have rocket-propelled shells that go 40 miles. So the base was out of reach, but now with these missiles, the base is not out of reach. And they did another provocative missile launch, I think, on the 6th of January near Japan, or the Sea of Japan or something. And now Trump is saying he wants to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, do you think something's wrong with Trump? I do. Is he just running his mouth and making promises that he never intends to keep? I don't know. I don't think he's running in that direction deeply, but I mean, Mexico, Canada, Greenland didn't change the name of the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is going to say, well, we're still calling it the Gulf of Mexico. Other countries will say the same thing. So if he wants to change the name in America, so what? Change the name. What if he wants to change the Atlantic Ocean to the Eastern American Ocean or something? So what? I mean, the other countries are probably not going to comply. What's the difference? I mean, but to say he's going to make Mexico a state, you know how stupid that is? Do you know how many people are in Mexico that came from other countries that are terrorist oriented? I just can't believe he said something like that. Do you imagine the cartels in Mexico becoming citizens and moving in different cities and setting up networks with ruthless murders of people to take over the drug trade, prostitution, various armed robberies, home invasions, carjackings, charging people protection in neighborhoods, and combating the other gangs in America? I mean, it's just, why would you even say something like that? It's absurd. He seems to have backed off on that one. Um, he's not going to invade Greenland. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, and he will invade Greenland. That means he's crazy. I mean, he just wouldn't need much, an aircraft carrier group, and you know, 3 or 4 expeditionary marine ships, you know, like 4,500, and land them and set up a base. And I mean, it'd be easy. What's Denmark going to do? Go to the UN? Trump would veto it. See, this Trump activity may cause the UN to break up because Trump knows he's got permanent veto power, so the UN cannot do anything to Trump or China or Russia because they just veto it. So this may cause the UN to break up. Trump is back on the same bandwagon with NATO. He wants the NATO members to give 5% of their GDP or the GNP, gross national product, or whatever they base it on. I don't know. And they're paying about 2% now. And what Trump did when he was president last time is he said, "Fine, I'm not going to pay either. Don't push the burden on America." You see, Biden takes the burden. Trump wants it stopped. Now, a lot of these countries may say no, and then NATO could fall apart easily. They'll probably agree to it and take time to adjust and see if they want to stay in NATO or drop out. Remember Hitler? Hitler wanted to grab countries like crazy, and he did so. And he didn't stop, and he made a stupid move to grab Russia. And he was fighting in so many places at the same time. That's what killed him. If he was more sane and sober and listened to his generals and went about methodically, he would have conquered and would have been a much bigger problem. But he was his own enemy. Spiritual warfare time. I was sensing something. So, yeah, I mean, Trump is getting scary if you look at it, you know? So I'm paying close attention to North Korea doing this provocation in terms of, is it time for the sleeper agents to go to work in America? The only way that is so-called axis of evil, they're all evil, but you know, which is North Korea, China, Iran, Russia, and then Cuba and Venezuela and Belarus and a few other places, that they're going to knock off NATO and America is if they all strike at the same time. Devastation to them could be brutal. So the sleeper agents that Biden let happen by leaving the border door open, and they're probably heavily on Chinese land that the Chinese bought that's adjacent or next door to American military bases. If they go to work first, then it softens America up for an attack by aircraft and warships with missiles and bombs and everything else. At the same time, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea are afraid of how much damage they're going to take. In the Asia Pacific region, the fight will be with Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and Guam, and the Philippines together, and Australia will join in with whatever little they can against China and North Korea, and they're going to take a lot of damage in their homeland, and they know it. But now that brings us to what will Trump do to make good on his threat to Hamas, that if all the hostages are not returned by January 20th, immediately all hell's going to break out. Now, what can Trump do? Let's analyze this, okay? And put the pieces together. This will be a rather deep dive. Trump is talking about attacking the Iranian nuke facilities. This will happen either by Israel or plus the United States, the UK, and Israel, or independently or together. It will not be hard to knock out the nuclear facilities. The radar is gone. I doubt they rebuilt it. They could say they did. I don't believe them. And just go in there, and if they have to knock more radar out, they will, and then blow them up with bunker buster bombs. It's easy. Does that hurt the Iranian economy? No. No, it doesn't. Does that hurt their military? No. Does that cause them to stop having proxies? No. What does it do? A lot of nothing, but it has one big value. It tells Iran that they can be hit over and over again, and it's a very dire threat to Iran. Will Iran listen? No. Don't expect that. Trump will be openly talking about Iran ruining the Middle East with their proxies. Trump knows that Iran wants to control Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, as well as Yemen and Lebanon and Iraq, and they'd love to have Syria back, and play games with the oil prices to bust the West. Okay, in other words, they dictate to these oil exporting countries in the Middle East how much oil to cut back on, which is one of the first things they'll do, which will cause prices to rise moderately. So instead of the $70-ish range, it may go to 90. And then they'll do another cutback and it will go to 100, 110, 120. And it'll travel like that. Over time, they'll try to just keep increasing it by maybe not only doing cutbacks, but also raising prices at the same time. And they probably figure if they get oil up to 200, they do better, Russia does better, and the West suffers badly economically, and Trump's not going to let that happen. And they would try to combine that with BRICS, replacing the US dollar, to cut the demand, dropping the value of the dollar at the same time, and break the back of NATO or the EU, really, and America, plus many other countries around the world who they would assume would gravitate towards them to get away from, to get closer to BRICS and stuff like that. Iran would continue to try to sell oil to China, which gets about 90% of it from Iran at sweetheart prices. And India gets a lot of oil from Iran. So you're going to have 2 billion plus countries, billion people plus, China and India, that are going to be very, very ticked off when Trump bears down hard on Iran. Now, how would Trump bear down hard? Trump would start with sanctions. Well, Iran doesn't obey the sanctions, they work around them. And I believe that the Biden administration, maybe even going back to the Trump administration, gave India some sort of an exemption from the sanctions so they could continue getting oil from Iran. So you could pass all kinds of sanctions. You could say if you sell oil to Iran, you're going to be subject to the death penalty, and all this stuff, but they're still not going to stop. What can Trump do and likely do? Send a few aircraft carriers to the area, maybe 2 or 3 at the same time, and have about 15 destroyers and missile cruisers there. Plus, we have so much boots on the ground in the Middle East now, and just start operating where the Persian Gulf dumps into the Indian Ocean over there, and just interdict the ships coming from Iran. And if they got oil or some Chinese ship coming in there and trying to leave with oil, just send them back. So that would cut Iran's oil sales down by 95%. They'd still be able to truck oil around to some countries, like probably maybe Turkey or some others. I don't know. I don't really know if they sell to Turkey. And this would break the back of Iran immediately. And it would be easy to do. He just keeps his capital ships, like aircraft carriers, away from Iran so they don't get hit with anti-ship missiles, which is easy to do. I'm going to take a fast break and we'll dig into this deeper. We're just getting started on what Trump will do. So the thing we gotta think about is this: will Trump smack heavy sanctions on Iran immediately for provoking the proxies and stirring up the Middle East? Biden is a blithering idiot, but how he really runs America, how could that be the case? So the idiots in the Biden administration run it, and they come from the Obama administration, and they're idiots. Or they want to destroy America. Probably the latter. They're trying to destroy America, as evidenced by the open borders, as evidenced by doing nothing about the drones. So Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea are trying to destroy America through BRICS by taking the demand away from the US dollar. And then Trump is saying 100% sanctions on any country that's going to play ball with BRICS to trade not using the US dollar. That'll work. They won't be able to sell anything into America. So he intends to defeat the BRICS thing. And at the same time, Iran, using Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and Yemen, have been trying to control the Middle East oil. But they had to get rid of Israel first, and then Iran was going to exert, by using their tentacles, the proxies, provoke the other nations like who? Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, to selling their oil according to Iranian guidelines, practices, and procedures. So they would say who gets the oil and who doesn't, and natural gas. And this would, of course, drive oil prices up, and Iran and Russia would thrive. And if the other countries didn't want to play ball, Iran with her proxies would attack them. The Houthis in Yemen attacked Saudi Arabia a few times, 2 times, using missiles. One the first time, and 2 the second time, damaging Saudi Arabia's largest oil refinery, the Aramco oil refinery, and shutting it down for days at a time. And then what do we see? We see Saudi Arabia turning around and saying, we're not selling oil and natural gas for US dollars or euros. That's still their policy today. It's been months of this. That's to keep Iran and her proxies off their back. And the UAE went ahead and joined BRICS to keep them off her back. Okay? So they think, correctly so, using BRICS and controlling the oil in the Middle East, they can break the back of America and the EU. And they could. But Trump understands it. I doubt Biden really does, but I doubt Biden is really a big player in the administration anyway. So Trump sees the threat, and he's going to counter it, and he's worried about the oil. That's why he wants to resume oil drilling that Biden's trying to stop. Okay? So Iran got to go because they're going to try to control the Middle East oil, and they'll just tell all the countries like Saudi and Jordan and Kuwait and so forth, join BRICS. And then they got to comply with the BRICS practices and procedures, which you don't sell oil and natural gas for dollars or euros. And oil and gas prices will rise dramatically. Some people say you can even get into $500 to $800 a barrel range, which would kill Europe and America quickly. People couldn't go to work. They couldn't ship goods. The trains, the ships, the airplanes. I mean, it would be a nightmare. And Iran and Russia could make sweetheart deals for members of BRICS and for China and India and stuff like that. So Trump knows this has to be stopped. So the Russia is discombobulated right now over the Ukraine war. So Russia, you could say, is contained. Okay. So then, what do you do about Iran? Well, you can't talk to Iran. They don't even talk to you usually. You got to start whittling Iran down. So Israel has taken out Hamas to some extent, Hezbollah to some extent, and Syria was taken over by the HTS. The Iraq is not much of a proxy, and it's scared to death of being taken over by the HTS in Syria, so they're doing nothing. And you got Iran, who's got no radar to guide missiles to Israel. And Russia ain't coming to save the day. So you got a problem. You still have a remnant of Hamas that Biden is trying to keep alive. You have a remnant of Hezbollah that Biden is trying to keep alive. You don't have much left in Syria except HTS, which is Al Qaeda and ISIS with a new paint job. And they would turn on Israel, but they're not in favor of Iran either. They're not friends with Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis. So that's a wild card. Okay? Iraq is not good for much. And then you have Iran, who's afraid to get into wars directly because they got so much to lose. So the whole thing is a real mess. So Trump will have either Israel or the U.S. do a strike or together or something. Do a strike on the nuclear facilities. That'll be their alibi. It'll scare Iran in the eyes and the mind of Trump, but it won't. They'll say we could continue. Okay. Now he's got to worry about a lot of things. One is Hamas. How is he going to make all hell break loose on Hamas? Because it doesn't look at all like they're coming up with the hostages. They won't even give a list of the living hostages, and it's the 12th of January already. They got 8 more days. So I would say it's probably not happening. They got 12 more days, not 8 more days, 12 more days. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're holding on till the last minute anymore. I don't think it's going to happen. So, what would the game plan be for all hell to break loose? Well, Israel would then be given a big, huge green light to go into Hamas. And what would this entail? Well, one of the first things that Israel would do is put an end to any cell phone communications there. If Egypt tries to let them use cell towers down there, they'll tell Egypt to knock it off. They may blow the cell towers up or they may just jam them, but they're not going to give them cell phones. They're not going to let cell phones work. And that's going to be into the internet too. Are they going to cut the water? I don't think so. Would they cut the sewage? No. No. Would they cut the electricity? I don't know. It could happen, but that's in the winter, it would be very bad. But the phone and the internet will hurt Hamas. Okay? What else will they do? Well, Trump and Netanyahu are both talking about cutting the humanitarian aid, and they will. Now, Hezbollah has warehouses with probably 6 months worth of water, bottled water, and food for their own people and medical. So Israel would very simply destroy these storehouses of water and bottled water and food from humanitarian aid that Hamas has been stealing. Now, hiding a hostage inside Gaza is one thing. Hiding, tons of food, nah, we know where it is. We've had hundreds and hundreds of prisoners recently from Hamas and PIJ, and we interrogate them. We know where the food is. They can't just move the food like you could take a hostage and just say, come on, come with me now, boom, and move them someplace in a few minutes. You can't do that with the food. You got to have forklifts and trucks, and. So we destroy the food that they have warehoused. That's within our capability, believe me. The food, it gets blown up, right? Maybe we'd even take it back, but probably just blow it up. So now they're running low on food. There's still possibly tunnels being used there, so it would have to be more aggressive action on the tunnels remaining if there really are any. And that would be phase one. Where are the hostages? Where are the hostages? They're still not going to move. Then we have to become, at the same time, also more aggressive in bombing weapons storage facilities, sites that Hamas is using, and we know what these are. And that's going to cause large loss of life. Mostly Hamas. Hamas is dedicated to committing atrocities on October 7th and then hiding behind human shields that most of the time are not innocent. They hate Israel. So then it's just a methodical whittling away of Hamas. What are you going to do with the Palestinians? I have no idea where you're going to put them, unless Trump figures out a way to persuades Egypt to let them come into the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt built a wall, military fortification, in the middle of the Sinai Peninsula, and this could be a deal between the president of Egypt and Trump to push the civilians out of Gaza. It's next to the Sinai Peninsula, into the Sinai Peninsula. On that half of it that's away from Egypt, so with a big military fortification line, they can't push into Egypt. And that might be the explanation for that, because it's a violation of the treaty with Israel, and Israel's not saying a word about it. So it appears to me this could be what the plan is. So they would carefully screen the civilians that they cannot find any ties to Hamas or PIJ or Hezbollah or any other crazies, and get them out of there into the Sinai Peninsula. They'd all be searched with metal detectors. There'd be no guns or weapons going down there. And they would try to keep Hamas out of there. So this gets the civilians out of Gaza, which means Israel is free to just blow the joint to smithereens and take care of the problem that way. In other words, they'd be killing a good 25 or 30,000 Hamas PIJ terrorists who refuse to leave. Probably a few thousand would surrender, maybe even 10,000. But a lot of them are going to be dedicated to being martyrs, and they'll just get blown up. Now, Trump would probably never allow Israel to occupy Gaza with Israeli citizens, because that's fulfilling prophecy. So I don't think he would ever do that, but I could be wrong. But the will Israel and America really go for blowing up 30,000 terrorists? I don't know if they'll do that. Netanyahu doesn't do things like that. So it may wind up with more of a deeper demilitarization, and then Trump and Netanyahu try to figure out what to do next. Netanyahu wants Israelis to live in Gaza. We believe that's the only way that we will make it, is to go back into Gaza and live there. So we really don't know specifically what Trump has in mind. This idea of us being able to find the hostages, look, that's nonsense. First of all, what hostages? Are there really any living hostages? If so, how many? And why do we assume that Hamas and PIJ won't just kill the hostages if they see they're under big attack? They would. They would just kill them on TV. I'll be right back. So the hostages, they're not playing straight with you. It's child's play for them to kill the hostages. Now, Netanyahu can't go ahead and create a policy and a practice that, the only way, they're not giving us the names of the living hostages. Probably most of them are dead. And we gotta operate like we're gonna just kill the hostages anyway. So, politically, he can't do that. Of course, of the families and friends of the hostages. So, Trump really won't do that either. I think the big thing is cut their communications, destroy their food supplies and their water supplies, keep giving humanitarian aid to the civilians, making sure Hamas doesn't get it, which is not hard to do. And I mean, when Hamas comes around and starts jacking the trucks, you shoot them. Have a few tanks around the trucks. The tanks have 2 machine guns. One's fired from inside the tank with cameras. The other one is a typical mounted on the top. Have snipers, whatever. Just kill them. That'll stop in a day or two. They'll try it 2 times, 3 times, and then voila, no more stealing humanitarian aid. How about that? And then they don't get any humanitarian aid. Although, how will you affect that? They'll just put civilian clothes on. So, it's you got to just cut the humanitarian aid somehow. And then I think you got to try to move them into the Sinai Peninsula if they want to eat, and then make sure that some Hamas will sneak in, but the others may kill them if they try to sneak in. But they'll have no weapons there because they'll be searched and metal detectors. So what are they going to do in the Sinai Peninsula? Sit there and scream at you and throw sand at you? You know, it's nothing. So, it's going to be the only real end of this Hamas thing is to devastate them. You know, it's the only end of it. And if you start doing a big attack, they're going to kill the hostages on the internet. If they have internet. Now, if there's no internet, well, then we don't have to worry about that, do we? I don't think they're going to cut the water because that would be genocide. Hamas will be rattled big time if their supplies of medicine, which is part of humanitarian aid, and the bottled water, and the food and fuel gets destroyed. That makes them very weak. So more and more will surrender, the numbers will drop. It'll make it easier. Now we got to go to Lebanon. What's going to happen in Lebanon? Initially, what's happening now is the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government got rattled. And now the army is occupying more positions south of the Litani River, which is 17 to 18 miles north of the Israeli border. And the idea is they got to destroy Hezbollah weapons and stop Hezbollah from being there. And as the Lebanese army moves into these towns and villages, Israel is withdrawing. Not completely, of course. We're still going to probably remain in Lebanon, I would say probably 3 or so miles from the border minimum for a long time, I think, to make sure we don't get any ground incursions or snipers or firing these shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles and stuff like that. Um, and I don't know if the Lebanese army will hold up, and I don't know if Hezbollah will fight against them. My understanding, what I think, is this. I think there's going to be a ceasefire that Trump's going to invoke or bring on, where Israel's not going to be getting attacked from Gaza. Gaza will be getting attacked from Israel, but not the other way around. Lebanon has already stopped, and it's probably going to stay stopped. Syria has stopped, it's probably going to stay stopped. Iraq has stopped attacking Israel, and it's probably going to stay stopped. And Yemen is continuing to try to attack Israel, and Biden is not using a heavy hand on them, and Trump is going to go after them a lot. Trump will warn them, but I believe he already did that. And, instead of sending 4 or 6 jets, he'll send 70, and they'll start bombing Yemen, initially all the Houthi locations. Then the government of Yemen and the army will be told, if you don't stop the Houthis, then we consider you conspirators with them and we're going to attack you. And that will happen. So then they'll attack the regular Yemen army and they'll bomb the daylights out of the place. And it'll be a wasteland. Will they do a ground invasion? Well, what Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea would want to see is America do a ground invasion in Yemen and Iran. They don't have to do one in Gaza, we're doing it. They don't have to do it in Lebanon, we're doing it. And there's no real need to do it in Syria or Iraq right now. Yemen and Iran know without a ground invasion, it's rather difficult to bust them out. Okay? But it's not. Okay? So Yemen is still intending to attack ships, attack American ships, attack Israel. So Trump is going to start with some way more sophisticated bombing on that. Blowing the Iranian nuke sites up isn't going to do anything. If Trump got a brain that he really wants to do it, the next attack, and Netanyahu may do this without Trump, is to hit the. You see, what's better? To sit there and put warships in the Persian Gulf that are at risk from anti-ship missiles, to stop the Iranian ships and interdict them, or to just destroy the ports and piers that Iran uses to offload the oil and gas. And you can hit the pipelines for the oil and gas too. Well, that means they might still have oil and they still have oil refineries, but they have no way to deliver it. But if you blow their refineries up, you put them out of action for an extended period of time. The piers may not be that long. If Iran responds favorably to that, which they won't, it'd be the end. But then the next is their refineries. So now their economy is finished. So they'll start rising up and trying to do things, and they'll keep getting more and more destroyed. And that's Jeremiah 49. Elam, which is Iran, possibly parts of Iraq. Some people think parts of Syria. There's debates about that, but it's definitely southwestern Iran, and which means Iran's going to get destroyed, and they're going to scatter out of Iran. Everybody's going to leave. So if you blow up the military bases, the bridges, the electrical grid, the power, the railroads, all this stuff, and they got no revenue from selling oil, then people are going to leave. What are they going to do? The government will collapse. They'll leave. The Taliban probably will attack them. And they'll go. That's what will happen. There'll be no place left to live there. Think about it. And Yemen is just going to be a wasteland. Maybe they'll go in on the ground. Maybe Trump is dumb enough to go in on the ground in Iran and Yemen. And then that'll bring the sleeper agents on America quickly. Because much of the military will be outside of America. So China and Russia and North Korea and Iran will say, hey, now we use the sleeper agents and take over America from within. And the troops located around the world will just dry up. They'll have no Pentagon, no nothing. We'll pick them off, or they'll surrender, or whatever. So maybe Trump will bring a swift ceasefire in the Middle East. Where things are temporarily calm. Then Elijah comes, then the temple comes. This is a theory, not a scripture. My theory is that the temple comes and Elijah's working, training the Levites as per Malachi 3, without the missiles and drones flying in, trying to kill everybody while they're at the temple. This will get the nations rattled and rise up against Israel, and then comes your siege in Zechariah 12. But that'll happen after Elijah's finished training the Levites, and the blessings of the Lord come on Israel. I know all this is foreign to the church world, but it's not foreign to your scriptures. It's right in there. Malachi 3 and 4, Zechariah 12 and 13. It's right there. They'll say that Trump's going to bring peace in the Middle East, and then they're going to say he's the man of sin, he's the beast, Trump came out of the pit, and when the pit opened, all the smoke came up and blocked the sun, right? What is that, Revelation 9? And then the locusts come with stingers like scorpions and snakes, and And where's the beast, and where's the mark of the beast, and where's the beast temple? And where is all this stuff? And the beast burns the whore and eats her flesh, which is America. Washington D.C. specifically is the whore, and that hasn't. So come on, let's get off the beast stuff. The beast ain't here yet. Okay, the beast is not a man. If you want to call Trump a man, some of you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't think Canada's ever going to be a 51 state. It's just never going to happen. I don't think it is. I'm not trolling Canada. I'm just saying that there's a lot of talk about it, and I do not think it's feasible at all. Trump is going to run America to its destruction, is what Trump's going to. And that's your prophecy of if he ever gets in. And they may still turn against him. Remember, that judge in New York is going to hand down sentence on Trump, and he said he believes and thinks it's going to go down as no penalty. They're going to leave Trump convicted with no penalty, so no probation, no jail, no fine. And what if he changes his mind? Trump tried to get the Supreme Court to delay the sentencing, and the Supreme Court didn't do it. Trump wanted it to happen after he was president. What if the judge was just lying and says, well, we changed our mind and, you know, we're going to, the judge issued his opinion. Do I think it's likely the judge will do this? No. No, I don't think so. Because it would involve the judge. I don't remember the day the judge is going to do it, but I think it's pretty soon. And it's before the 20th. And if he says, yeah, Trump's got to go to jail, well, then he would have to say because Trump is a flight risk, he has to appear for sentencing, and then at the sentencing hearing, they said he has to go to jail and he has to start serving immediately, and then the whatever they call them in the New York courts, I think they're called court officers, would grab Trump, handcuff him, and he would go into a cell and then get transported to a jail. And Trump's lawyers probably prepared for that and do an emergency motion with the Supreme Court because of all the circumstances to give him a few months to file an appeal, and it would disrupt the country and this and that. So Trump could still get knocked out. Trump wasn't believing the guy too much because he wants that sentence hearing postponed till after the 20th. Because as a seated president, you know, it's another ball game. The New York City or the New York State law enforcement are not going to be able to come arrest him. He'll just use the military and the Secret Service. Nothing will happen to him. Trump can only pardon himself if he makes it to January 20th at noon. So if he has his sentencing postponed past then, he can just pardon himself January 20th, and that's the end. People could bellyache, but so what? Trump's last term would be this coming term. He doesn't care. Once he takes office, the people could be upset about him pardoning himself. He doesn't care. Nobody cares that Biden pardoned his son anymore. That blew over. It's the same thing. It'll blow over. Do I think the guy in New York's going to do it? No. But he could. Maybe he's fooling us. I don't know. I do not think that Vance would be president if they locked Trump up. Because Vance was not sworn in either. So I think the way they would play that is if they were going to play straight a little bit, they would have Biden stay president until they could run a new election, which would be at least 3 to 6 months, 3 months probably. They wouldn't just put Vance in, they'd run a new election because they would say, it was people voting for Trump, not Vance. So nobody's going to pardon Trump. Trump's in jail. And his lawyers are fighting bloody murder with the court, Supreme Court, to get him out. They may or may not work. And Biden stays. I don't believe they put Kamala in, and there'd be a new election, and Biden would run again, which is what he wants. He said that he thought he could win. He shouldn't have listened to the Democrats. So then Biden gets to run again, and he'd probably win. And I don't know who he'd run against, an incarcerated Trump. That'd be not easy. So Biden would probably win with Kamala as VP. And there you have it. That could still happen. Remember, Kamala did not get the Congress to not ratify the Electoral College votes, which there was some sort of opportunity there, but they didn't take it. So they may likely not take the opportunity to sentence him, but it's not them. And now it's the state of New York and the courts in New York. And they hate Trump, and they might do it. The judge might be afraid of what Trump's going to do to him when he's president, and the prosecutor too, and they may change their mind and say Trump's going to serve 12 years or something like that, right? If they arrest them in the courthouse, the Secret Service is going to stand down. Then the theory is going to develop that he can't be president because he's a felon in jail, and the next thing would be protecting him as a former president doesn't work because he's in jail, and then they could suicide him, or Trump could get sick on his own and die. I don't know. Could that happen? It would shock the world. It could, and it gives Biden a chance to get to be president again. He'd run against whatever the Republicans threw up against him. I don't know, maybe the guy from Florida or something, or Texas. I don't know. It wouldn't work. Biden would probably win. Trump didn't win by that much against Kamala. Biden would surpass Kamala in votes, and people got really nervous about Trump with, Mexico, Canada, Greenland, the Gulf of America. I'm not supporting Ukraine. We're going to bomb Iran nuclear sites. All hell's going to rain down on Hamas. And, I don't think it's so. I'm not really thinking there's a high probability of this. I think there's a low probability of it, but it's still a probability. Just because he issued an opinion a few weeks ago doesn't mean he can't renege and switch back and say, for some reason, this, that, or the other, he's changed his mind. So I don't know. I'm reading the chat. Somebody made a comment that I don't quite understand. Think about it. He is on Codental until the 5th of January. Well, the January 6th came to pass, and they ratified the Electoral College already. And just after then, he will not have to be the claimant for the day for at least 3 fortnights. That's the crazy thing no one seems to accept. I don't know where this is coming from. I never read this anywhere, so I don't understand where you're saying 3 fortnights. I have no knowledge or idea about this. From what I know, and I'm pretty sure I got it right, on January 20th, when he takes his hand off the Bible after taking the oath, he's the commander in chief of the military, he's the president of the United States at that moment. And he could tell the military what to do right then and there. And that's January 20th. I don't think there's any 3 fortnight waiting period at all. I never saw that in the Constitution. So I don't know what you're saying. It makes no sense to me. A fortnight is 2 weeks, and you're saying 6 weeks. And I've never read anything to that effect in the Constitution. And everything I know is January 20th, he's it, period. What don't I understand? Where are you getting the 3 fortnight waiting period for Trump? I don't understand any. I've never read any of that in the Constitution. I would love to be enlightened if it's something I've missed. That's where I'm disconnected with what you said. As far as I know, January 20th, he takes the oath of office. That's it. He's president for 4 years. Right then and there, that minute. I don't think there's anything like a 3 fortnight probationary period or anything like that. Um, Not that I ever heard of. If you know of something in the it would have to be in the Constitution. I'd love to hear about it. I'm just checking social media to see if anything happened recently. What in the world is this? The hostage deal with Hamas is going poorly, the negotiations. They don't want a ceasefire, they want a permanent withdrawal, an end of the war. Israel, all the soldiers leave Gaza, and the war is over. And after that, they'll give us the hostages in exchange for terrorists in our prisons. They basically haven't moved. So they're going to defy Trump. And, one thing about Trump is he's not going to take them defying him because he knows after that his word means nothing in the world. So he will hit back hard. he knows if he hits back hard, then the whole world's going to listen to him when he says something. They're going to know he means it. So he's going to hit them hard. These are not real smart people. These are criminally insane people. They're not smart. Okay? And they're they want to play with fire with Trump. They can play with fire with Trump and see what happens. I wholeheartedly believe Trump is going to initially unleash Israel on them, and then he might join in too. Israel's decided to make their own bombs, and I think we make our own artillery now. I think we're going to make more of our own bombs in Israel. We know how to do that. Instead of relying on other countries, we're going to make more and more of our weapons inside Israel. So we can't have a president say, "Oh, you better do this, or I'm going to stop your bomb shipments." We're not interested in having that happen again. So that's what's going on. Let me get into my notes here and see what I forgot, because I've been working on this in the morning. Oh, going back to the almonds I was covering yesterday, the almonds in the Bible is a good food. The word for almond means uh, to watch or wait. The almond tree is among the first trees to awaken when the weather changes, from the winter sleep. And that's what Yeshua is basically telling us, that we should watch. It means watch or awake, that type of thing. Okay, I thought that was interesting. So prophetically, we're not going to see Canada getting annexed. There's no time for that. So it's noise at this point. I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to it. As far as I know, Iran still has no radar to guide their missiles. So I can't imagine why they're going to strike Israel, because Israel's just going to come back and blow all sorts of stuff up on them. So I think it's an empty threat. I'm going through my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything. So Trump would likely knock out all the proxies in the Middle East of Iran using Israel, and knock out Iran and get all of this brick stuff finished, not as a threat. That's his plans. China is not going to tolerate Trump putting an embargo on the Persian Gulf to stop their oil from coming from Iran, because Iran is giving China, sweetheart pricing on the oil. India won't do anything militarily or anything. India will just scream and yell. They won't do anything. I don't think. But it is end times. Um, so everybody here in Israel is just kind of waiting for Trump. I think everybody in America and Europe is just kind of waiting for Trump. And I think Trump is trying to run the country now. He sent an envoy to Qatar. Trump sent his own envoy, ENVOY, to Qatar to get involved in negotiations with Hamas and Israel over the terrorists. Could you imagine that? He's sending his own envoys. He has no authority at this time. I think Trump's behaving this way because he's very scared about they might switch and sentence him to prison immediately, and he doesn't know what the heck he's going to do then. That would cause civil uprising for sure. Oh, for sure. I I've been thinking about Elijah training the Levites with the bombs and the drones coming in, and I have to go back. I think the Lord showed me no, that ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. There'll be a brief period of time where there'll be peace and cease fighting, and Elijah will get the job done. And then the blessings will come on the Lord, from the Lord on the people, and then they'll rise up against us. And the two witnesses in Zechariah 12:6 burn up the enemies on the right hand and the left. They never really invade us. They surround us, lay siege to us. It's all in your Bible. It's not. I'm not making this stuff up. Because your church doesn't teach it, you should not draw the conclusion that it's not real, because it's in your Bible, and it never happened. Yet it's unfulfilled. I teach the real gospel, the real prophecies, what's going to happen. I teach real spiritual warfare. If you like that and you want to help it spread to other people and help other people, you should give an offering. That helps it spread. Okay? And if you like that I kick against the apostate churches a lot, using the scriptures accurately, it's another good reason to give. If you don't like these things and you support the apostate church and you support fictional prophecy, then what are you listening to me for? So I think that, if there was missiles and drones and attacks coming with Elijah training the Levites, we would at least read in the scriptures, Elijah shall train the Levites in a time of great distress, but it's not there. So I think we're headed towards the fighting in Gaza stopping, but the bombs, the terrorists are still there. Fighting in Lebanon stopping, terrorists are still there. Fighting in Syria stopping, terrorists are still there. And Iran probably getting destroyed along with Yemen, which is Edom. What about Iraq and Jordan? Eventually they'll get it, but maybe not right now. And then Egypt. Egypt intends to join in the attack against Yemen with aircraft. And that is probably going to light up the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which are friends of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And they may get rid of Sisi and have what the Bible refers to as a cruel leader. So there's a lot of prophecy to go, but our direction now should be looking for Elijah to start working openly in Jerusalem, training the Levites. And it says in Zechariah 12, there's a lot of believers in Jerusalem, or people loyal to Jehovah in Jerusalem. That's not really the case now. So you guys that have the true gospel may be coming over here. I mean, how many of you would not want to come here if Elijah is out there working openly in Jerusalem? I mean, now the church people are going to reject Elijah because they don't understand the Bible. Not all of them will, some will. There'll be a lot of signs and wonders and miracles. Apostle John will be working too, and he'll be rejected by a lot of people. They won't last long, but they'll, and the church at this point will start to fall apart. Like, it's a house built on sand, and the storm's going to come and it's going to wash away. And people are going to be very, very confused that survive, and they're going to be looking for answers. I imagine a lot will fall away. They never were really in the first place. They were just going through the motions, and they needed a flesh vehicle to convince themselves of their salvation. So thus, Satan operates in the flesh, really. So then you need a big building, you need an orchestra, good music, you need all this stuff. You need a day camp, a daycare, all the, a youth pastor, a women pastor, this or that, all the churchianity stuff to play to people's flesh. And when that's gone, the people are going to say, oh, what the heck's the use? They're going to just not go through the motions, because a lot of them are not really in the gospel or in Yeshua. They're just going through the motions. Broad and wide is the road of destruction, and many find it. Straight and narrow is the correct path, which means you follow the scriptures. And few people find it. So you're never going to have a lot of them, but I think there's going to be some coming out. They're going to fall apart real quick. Now, could it be that the sleeper agents are released and that stuff goes on while Elijah's training the Levites and stuff? It could be. I don't think so. It might be. So that's the next point that we're looking for, and that could be right around the corner. Gaza is almost not doing anything to us. Their ability to attack us is about 2% what it was at their peak. Nothing's coming out of Lebanon, nothing's coming out of Syria, nothing's coming out of Iraq. So far, nothing came out of Iran. It's just Yemen left. And the last 2 days, we didn't even get an attack from them. Don't know why. The last raid from the UK and the US might have really been disabling to them in some regard. I don't know. Let me take a look at the social media and see if anything happened of significance since we started, particularly with an eye on is Iran preparing to attack us or something. Give me a minute here, I'll go through it. Somebody filmed a hyena, but it looks like a pretty small hyena walking through a part of Israel, I believe, in the Negev, walking near a wall. It doesn't look like the hyenas you see in the zoos in North America, but it looks very much like a hyena, but maybe half size. I would say this hyena is 60 pounds, 70 pounds, not much. Unless I'm not reading the size of them correctly, but I think I am. So the guy, Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, is going to be at the negotiations in Qatar today regarding the hostages and Hamas. So I think he's probably going to make sure Hamas understands Trump intends to destroy them. All hell will break loose. He won't give them specifics. Why warn them? Just tell them all hell will break loose and you won't know it. You won't like it. That's smart. Looks like the Congress is going to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court at The Hague. I don't know what good it'll do, but it's interesting. I wonder what Trump will do about them. I don't think Trump's going to enjoy that. He'll be afraid they'll do it to him. The fire in the Los Angeles Pacific Palisades, Malibu area has grown up to 1,200 acres within hours, from 200 to 1,200. So this fire is growing quickly. If I saw these fires popping up in numerous cities in the United States, I would start thinking, well, we've got the prophecy getting fulfilled from Jeremiah 50:51 on would kindle fires in and about her cities. But for just this one fire, I don't think we should go there. It's not enough yet. Let's see. Hochstein's in Lebanon, trying to work with negotiations up there, extending the ceasefire for another month. And that's all nonsense because the existing 60-day ceasefire runs to January 26th, which means if, and I'm going to start saying if Trump gets in on the 20th, well, then um, Israel's going to be unleashed. The Americans are trying to get the Lebanese army to perform the terms of the ceasefire as they were supposed to, and they haven't. And it might work a little bit, but it will just be superficial and temporary. Israel's going to have to intervene. Let's see. Um, One of the subscribers said that they think Trump has lost his mind like Nebuchadnezzar, and it's a very good analogy. I think Trump is going off the deep end, and I think Trump could likely be playing to the people of America about all these great things he's going to do. Mexico, Canada, Greenland, change the name of the Gulf of Mexico and clean up the Middle East and break up BRICS and all that so people don't remove him from office out of a fear of a revolution of the people rising up. But they might try to remove him. This New York judge could be nuts enough to do it. Maybe he's afraid of Trump. The judge could be afraid of Trump and wants Trump in jail. Trump may have threatened him, and he's afraid that if he just Trump might have said, if you're going to keep me a felon, I'm going to get you and come back because they're labeling him a felon, and he might want to get revenge against the prosecutor and them, and they're sitting there thinking, well, the word is he's going to go after us. We better get him locked up, and it could be. if this does happen, and it can happen, America will most likely be in civil war. And that will most likely mean the sleeper agents will take advantage of that and deploy against the American military. That now, am I saying it's going to happen? No. I don't know that it will, and I don't know that it won't. But I'm telling you, there's a possibility that it could happen. The judge just shifts and says, no, Trump's got to do 8 years in jail or whatever, right? 3 years. All he has to do is say Trump got to do a year in jail. And he's a flight risk, and officers of the court, he goes into custody and begins his term today. That's it. Then it depends on what the lawyers with the Supreme Court do. If they'd have to intervene fairly immediately. If they don't, then you got Biden holding a new election. Biden's not going to turn around and say, oh, well, Kamala's the runner-up, so she's president. Or Vance is the vice president. He's not. He's going to say he's going to hold a new election so he could run again. And that would probably be 6 months down the road. It could be in 3. Israel could do a vote of no confidence in 3 to 4 months, but I think America would take 6. And that puts Biden in until roughly the 4th of July. Nobody, I mean, the crazy people in America would love that, but nobody else would. Be a lot of people that I would say that'll be ruler against ruler. That'll blow up. The states like Texas and Florida and other states will rise up. And, oh man, it all relies on some lunatic judge in the New York courts in New York City. Really, if that derelict decides to sentence Trump and have the office, in some courts they call him a marshal, a bailiff. In New York City, they have a position called a court officer. It's not common. They wear a badge that looks like an NYPD um, detective badge, or and it's a gold shield they call it there, and they carry a gun and they got powers, but they don't work outside the court. I believe they carry their gun off duty and they could shoot somebody trying to threaten their life and stuff like that, but they're not trained as patrol officers, they're court officers. So they get some training for sure. They've got to learn the law, they got to learn firearms, right? They got to learn handcuffs and restraints and transporting prisoners and things like that to the prison. But they're not going to learn traffic and accident investigation and domestic disputes and burglary and how to collect evidence at the scene and all that. So I don't know what kind of training they get. They may get the training. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know so. So they're not well respected by the NYPD, but they do extend the courtesy to them. You know, of a traffic stop, they're going to let them go. You know, and stuff like that. Because they're law enforcement officers, and they got to work with these guys because the cops come into court all the time. So they'll be nice to them on a traffic stop, or if they get into a fight in a bar, they'll throw it his way, or if there's an accident, they might throw it his way. Cops do that, for another cop. You have an accident. I'm not saying every cop does it, but it's pretty common. They'll throw the accident investigation towards the other cop. There's corruption, believe me. Believe me. You know, you'd be shocked at how many people run around with badges, running red lights and speeding, and you pull them over. I'm a county supervisor, and they show you a badge. What the heck does he need a badge for, right? Um, you got all kinds of people that are not law enforcement officers, but they're in the government and they can run around with a badge. It's ridiculous, but it goes on. And they're politicos, and the cops don't want to start up with them and see what happens. They don't know they could get in a lot of trouble. You know, you could wind up working graveyard shift for years. You know, you come home in the morning, if you're lucky, you see your kids as they're walking out the door to go to school. And then you wake up when they come home from school and start making a racket, and then you get to spend some time with them. And then you got to go to work at night when your wife and kids go to sleep. You're sitting there drinking coffee, getting dressed to go to work. I mean, it's not pleasant. Now, some people like graveyard for the same reasons I just told you. It goes both ways. So I never cared for it. I like the going in like at 3 o'clock, you know, to midnight, something like that. It's what I used to like. There were other shifts where you go in the evening and come off about 2 or 3 in the morning. I didn't mind that either. As long as I got home and it was dark for a while and I could go to sleep, that was okay. A lot of guys like the graveyard because you get off in the morning, and if you live, your job and your house are close, you could get there and say goodbye to your kids on the way to school. Then you got time with your wife, and you have whatever meal you're going to call it, breakfast, whatever. Usually they'll call it breakfast, and then lay down and go to sleep, and then you wake up when your kids are home from school, and maybe you sleep through that if you got it upstairs. You don't hear the noise. You sleep till maybe 5, 6 o'clock, and then you get up and you know, have another breakfast, and then you got time with your family. You know, maybe 11 o'clock at night when they go to bed, you roll out the door and go to work, and you're driving without traffic, you know, at night, and you're running around without the traffic jams. You got a lot of opportunity to catch criminals because you got a lot of burglaries happening. You got a lot of crime at night, you know, and you could get there, you know, 11 in the morning or 3:30 in the afternoon. It's hard to get to the crime scene when you get a call because of the traffic. You know, you can put your sirens and lights on all you want when there's a lot of cars, you're stuck, you know. And yeah, it's interesting, you know. So I don't know what's going to happen, but don't be surprised if this guy does an about face. He might have released this opinion about Trump, not giving him any penalties, just leaving him as a felon, to make everybody think that the decision was going to be nothing. And then he turns around and smacks Trump with prison immediately, right then and there. And I'm a little distressed that Trump filed with the courts to have the sentencing postponed and was turned down. Trump doesn't trust the guy, or he wouldn't have filed to have that postponed. And if the courts were on Trump's side, they would have postponed it, and then Trump could have just quashed it when he was president. So this thing could happen. Trump may not make it. Just don't get shocked if it happens. It could happen. Am I saying it's going to happen? No, but it could happen. Easy steezy. All the judge has to say, well, we, you know, when we came up with that dissenting opinion before I actually did the sentencing, we heard from a lot of people, friends of the court, and we reevaluated, and now I decide that I think Trump does need to go to prison. And that's it. The fact that he was elected president will be irrelevant to the judge's ruling because it's a question of, is Trump guilty? Yes, according to the jury, Trump is guilty. And then he comes up with an appropriate sentence for Trump. the fact that Trump is president gets pushed on the side is not relevant to the case. The way these characters think, they don't think that way, but they make you think that they think that way. So we don't know. So I would say heads up until January 20th, which is expected to be a big terrorist day. Imagine if there's a big terrorist day on January 20th. Ay, ay, ay. These are end times. Syria, with a 300,000 man army, fell in 11 days to a force of 70,000. Completely breaks everything they teach in every war college around the world. Don't think things crazy aren't going to happen. Expect the unexpected, and you won't be disappointed. Not many people come to my videos anymore. I'm down by half. It used to be a lot higher. I don't know, maybe I'm not getting the exposure anymore. So you might want to spread this around with your friends and other people if you want them to get this kind of news with the true gospel, which is extremely rare on the internet to ever find this, by the way. I don't know anyone else who's teaching it. And I'm in Israel, and I give you the perspective as an Israeli living here many years. And if you haven't lived in the Middle East, you really don't know how it operates, you know. So that's my 2 cents. Support the work if you like it. If you don't like the work, obviously you're not going to support it. So please pray for me and my wife for our peace, safety, protection, joy, and healing. Pray for our animals and pets, which are all rescues, for them to be happy, healthy, and whole. And pray for better videos. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I'll keep you updated as things develop. So I might do emergency live streams and stuff. But I think Trump is laying it on thick to the people because he's afraid that he might get sentenced. And he wants the people to rise up because that's his only real chance of getting out and being president again. So he's blowing all kinds of smoke into America, like Mexico state, Greenland state, Canada state. You know, we're going to finish off Hamas, won't return the hostages, boom. We're going to get Iran's nukes, you know, we're going to stop the war in Ukraine. What's he going to do with North Korea and China? I don't know. We're not going to do NATO. We're not going to pay all the money without NATO paying, you know. And, you know, remember he said he was going to get rid of Obamacare over and over and over, and he never did. He never did. And he always kept telling Israel, you need to have a two-state solution. He kept telling that to Israel the whole 4 years he was president. Maybe he was just doing lip service to make it sound good, but I don't think so. Now he's acting weird. All this stuff he's promising, it registers with me as weird. Like, what's going on, you know? Like, the people in Canada are praising they're getting rid of Trudeau. I think that's nice. Trudeau is a piece of garbage. But what I'm afraid the poor people in Canada aren't realizing, they're just going to get another Satan bot in this place. Till redemption, that's the way it's going to be. But redemption is at the doors. And I say my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And I hope you got something out of this, and I'm out.